Hey guys, Monkey AE here for another video. Today we're going to be matchmaking and predicting the most exciting fights in the UFC. Now, what this means, I'm going to be predicting fights that haven't been made in the UFC. Now, first fight, Brian Ortega versus Charles Oliveira at lightweight. This would be a really interesting fight because it'd be Grappler's Paradise. It would be the Unstoppable Force at featherweight meeting the Unstoppable Force at lightweight in terms of grappling. Both of these guys are very impressive, and all things considered, we actually might see this fight one day because Brian Ortega did say that he wants to go up. In my opinion, I think Charles would beat Ortega because Charles' hands are better, his kicks are better, and he's more dynamic, and he just goes for it more. All things considered, Ortega is good, but he gets abused for most of his fights, and then he will come out of nowhere and go for a submission, whereas Charles, he's got power. Charles dropped Gaethje. He dropped him with a straight jab, which is insane considering how much more effort it took from Holloway to drop him or from Poirier to drop him. Charles just did it with one punch. So I think Charles would drop Ortega. I don't think Ortega gets knocked out, nor do I think he gets submitted, so that's why I'm going to say Charles by decision. Next fight, Dan Hooker versus Charles Oliveira. Again, this fight, I think it's actually pretty probable. I think it's pretty likely this fight could happen, all things considered. And again, in this scenario, I think Charles would submit Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker's got power, he's got hands, don't get me wrong. And Charles, he does have a bit of a glass chin, in basically every single fight Charles has been in, he gets dropped at one point or another. Islam, he gets dropped. Poirier, he gets dropped. Chandler, he gets dropped. Gaethje, he gets dropped. I can't remember if Arman dropped him. I don't think so from memory. But still, I think there's a good chance that Dan Hooker could drop Oliveira. But Oliveira's an animal. He'd get up. And again, he's also got power. And I think he would submit Hooker. In the Gamrot fight, I don't really think Hooker showed submission defense necessarily. He showed wrestling defense, but not necessarily submission defense. And also, Dan's the taller guy, he's going to be more susceptible, but still, I think this would be a banger fight. And also, this is going to be the battle of the blondes. Both of these guys have kind of revitalized their careers, well, Charles did back in the day, but especially Dan Hooker now, he's on an impressive winning streak, blondes, tattoos, it'd be a great fight. I just hope they make this fight. Next fight, Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje 3. This is the fight to make for both of these guys. They're both coming off losses. They're both saying they probably want one more and then they'll call it. And if I had to predict it, I've got a feeling Poirier would try to go for a guillotine, because in his mind and in my mind, it'd be a really fitting way to finish his career by finally hitting a submission, a proper guillotine submission. Gaethje, I think he wouldn't be run over by all means, no way. But I think Poirier in the Islam fight showed that he's very smart. He's got the defensive capabilities. His hands aren't as quick nowadays, I will admit that. But Gaethje's still an animal, but he kind of got exposed by Holloway for his lack of game planning, which is strange because he had the perfect game plan against Poirier by throwing the high kick. Still, this will be a banger. I'd love to see this fight be made, and both of these guys can then retire afterwards, Next fight, Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. Now, as you guys know, this was meant to happen in 303. Do I think it happens this year? No, I think it's probably going to be maybe January next year or December this year maybe, because 310 hasn't been announced, so it is possible. But still, my prediction is I think Conor will knock out Michael Chandler. And I say this because Michael Chandler, in every single fight, he nearly gets his opponent in the first round. He's so close every single time. He wobbled Gaethje, he wobbled Oliveira, he nearly killed Poirier. But again, Conor, I think he'd be able to endure it. And also, there's kind of a classic formula for Conor if you think about it. The guy comes blitzing forward, step back, throw a left, then the guy drops. This is classic Conor McGregor written all over it. Regardless, I hope this fight can happen because I just want to see Michael Chandler back. He always brings an entertaining fight. He's never ever had a boring fight in the UFC, and I just love to see it. I just wish this fight could have happened earlier because frankly a lot of the hype has died behind it, unfortunately, and it's been like nearly 2 years since Michael Chandler's fought, and it's been maybe 3 years since Conor McGregor fought. Next fight, MVP versus Wonderboy. Now, I can't remember who said it. I think it was Wonderboy. He said that if this fight were to happen, it'd be the most boring thing ever. Because if you think about it, MVP is a counter striker, Wonderboy is a counter striker. They need someone to bring the action to really show off their skills. Whilst this may be true, I think these guys both understand that they're kind of at the end of their careers. They want to bring entertainment value. I think these guys can pull it off, you know. And MVP, I think his hands are just a little bit better nowadays, because in the Ian Gary fight, Ian Gary had this aura about it. Well, Ian Gary had the idea that he was a better striker. He was the best striker at welterweight, and he kind of got exposed. You know, he had to rely on his wrestling and his submission attempts to even compete with MVP. But Wonderboy, don't count him out either. He's still an animal. You know, in the Kevin Holland fight, that's one of my favorite fights of all time, and he just kept going, and the kicks and the punches were ruthless. You know, and I think if both of these guys can bring the energy, retain the counter striking style, but pushing forward, this will be a classic. And I just really hope they make this fight, because I know they booked Wonderboy for 307 against Joaquin Buckley, but come on, just make this fight, guys. This is the fight to make, and it'd be the most exciting. Next fight, Dricus du Plessis vs Khamzat. I think this would be a really interesting fight, because assuming Khamzat wins his next fight against Whittaker, you have two undefeated guys fighting for the belt, and DDP has really no one to answer him. You know, it's like who's gonna stop DDP? No one knows. And Khamzat, no one knows how to stop this guy either. I think in this one, the hands are going to be there, but also there's going to be a lot of wrestling and a lot of submission attempts, because Khamzat's a submission artist, and so is DDP. Still though, I think DDP, just being the animal he is, I think he can pull this off, go into the later rounds, and eventually get a decision, because I don't think you can tap DDP. I think the only way you really get him out of this is if you just clean knock him out. And if anyone was going to do it, it was going to be Adesanya, and look at how that turned out. DDP was actually pushing the action against Adesanya, and I don't think he'd be afraid of Khamzat either. Khamzat would probably have a good round one, but after that it'd slowly go downhill, and DDP will walk away with a decision. DDP has actually said that he would like to see this fight, so who knows if Khamzat can beat Whittaker, which I'm kind of 50-50 about, and DDP can defend his belt against Strickland, which I think he will. We could definitely see this fight maybe sometime next year, so that'll be great. Next fight, Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev. This is the fight to make, because Magomed arguably is the most deserving fighter to fight for the belt. I mean, more so than Khalil Roundtree. I wish this fight was made, because Alex Pereira right now is at the top of his career. He's doing the best he's ever has been doing, and everyone thinks he's that guy. You know, he's number 2 pound for pound in the world, but there's one unanswered question of Magomed Ankalaev, who people say he's got hands. That is true. I don't think he's got enough hands for Pereira, and also this guy seems to be struck by the light heavyweight curse of being a moron and saying that he wants to stand with Pereira. I don't think this fight would go into the later rounds. I think if Magomed was smart, he'd go for the takedowns. But who knows, Alex, we haven't really seen him wrestling in a long time, and the last time we did see him wrestle was against Blachowicz back in 2023, sometime last year, and still, that's been a long time. Pereira could have improved, you never know. I think Pereira is just far too calculating and smart, and I think he'd knock him out with a left hook. And I'd love to see this fight, because if he can do it, then he's got the free reign to go up to heavyweight, down to middleweight, whatever. But until then, there's always going to be that one unanswered question of whether or not he could beat Ankalaev. But in my opinion, I think he can. Next fight, one of the biggest fights you could make in the UFC right now, Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones, uniting the heavyweight belts. My prediction is Aspinall by KO, because in an earlier video I said that maybe this is a 50-50 fight, but after watching Aspinall against Blades, there's no doubt in my mind this guy is going to knock out Jon Jones. I say this because Jon Jones, he may be able to, he's got submission ability, but Tom Aspinall's different. He's a black belt, he's smart, he's intelligent, but he's quick. He's far quicker than Jon Jones, especially at heavyweight. And because of that, I think he'd reach Jon Jones far quicker than Jon Jones would reach him. And Jon Jones, frankly, it's not like he has a chin. It's not, well, he does have a chin, but it's not like Max Holloway level. Like, he can be dropped. And I think Tom would be the guy to do it. And I'm pretty confident in this one. I'm actually more confident in this pick than the rest of them combined. So because of that, Aspinall my KO, I'd say very early into the fight. If this can go into the later rounds, great, that'd be a classic fight, but I severely doubt. And also realistically, I don't think this fight is going to happen, because in my opinion, I think Jon is probably going to beat Miocic and then just retire. But it's a shame. He becomes the heavyweight champ and then he doesn't even fight the interim, but he wants to fight number 8. So good for him. And yeah, that just about does it, guys. Those were the fights that I hope one day could be made, because they'd be great fights regardless. But still, make sure to leave a like, drop a comment, tell me about these picks, whether or not I'm wrong, whether or not I'm right. Yeah, just build the channel. I want to see some interactions. I'll be answering all the comments as usual. I'll see you guys in the next video.